well-traveled highway. It's not even on a dusty gravel road. You have to want to be there when you find it, 'cause it's not on any maps I know. Out across the field through the pasture, you climb along a steep and rocky trail. When you cross that little creek in the valley, you'll see that vine-covered church on the hill. That vine-covered church above the valley, where the congregation gathered to pray. Built with their hands from the forest, now stands as a marker for the grave. The siding and shingles are tattered, the steeple leans slightly to the right, and though all the windows were shattered, you can still hear them singing at night. The brothers and sisters who worship, they gather in that holy place still, though they lie at rest in the valley, beneath that vine-covered church on the hill. That vine-covered church above the valley, where the congregation gathered to pray. Built with their hands from the forest, now stands as a marker for the grave. Yes, it still stands as a marker for the grave. Hello, my friends. Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works Workshop. Don't be confused. That is not the new song I wrote. That is not the new song. So just don't be confused, because it seems like everybody gets confused all the time anytime I do any of these kinds of things. That song was written back in the 90s. It was written about a little church that I saw off the edge of the highway when I was heading to a bluegrass festival. But I wasn't trying to write a song about that little church. I was trying to write a song about a one-room schoolhouse on my father-in-law's property. And it was a neat little old German schoolhouse, and I tried, and usually I don't have any trouble writing a song. Once I get started with an idea, it usually comes to me. But I tried for 6 months to write this song about this little schoolhouse. Well, every time I would sit down to write about that little schoolhouse, I am not kidding you, that little vine-covered church would come into my mind. And every single time that would happen, and it would take over my thoughts, and I couldn't write about that little I couldn't write about that little schoolhouse. So finally, I thought, well, maybe God's trying to tell me something, so I just switched to the vine-covered church, and instantly I had a song. Now, here's the true story on this, and I know that many of you will think, oh, he's exaggerating for YouTube, or he's exaggerating for the video, or to make a point, but I promise you I'm not. This is the black and white gospel truth, my hand on a Bible. Every single time I played that song, not some of the time, every single time I played that song for the first year, somebody came up and told me a story about that little vine-covered church. And the very first story was the one that sent the chills down my spine. I got off stage the very first time I played this. We were at the Farmington Auction Barn in Farmington, Missouri, and we were playing a show there. And I got off stage, and a man come around behind the stage and grabbed me, and he says, "Hey, son, I want to tell you, I really like your song about the vine-covered church, but you know you have to change the words." And I thought that was really odd. I thought, change the word? Why would, I said, well, I don't get it. Why would I need to change the words? He says, "Oh, you don't know?" I said, "I don't know what?" He says, "Well, they just tore that church down yesterday." He said that church was over 100 years old, and they dozed it down yesterday. Now you keep in mind, you put all that together. It took me 6 months to write that song. And, and the very, very first time I sang it was the day after that little church was destroyed. It was just to me like that song was to keep that little church living on. Later on, someone actually sent me a picture of that church and had it framed that they had taken years ago. And every single time I played it for the remainder of that year, every single time, even in Dodge City, Kansas, somebody came up to me and told me a story about that church. And I'm not exaggerating. One of the stories, I don't remember all the stories, but a couple of them were, you kind of heard the same thing over and over. Like, my grandfather, he played at that church, or he went to that church. And then another guy told me one time, he says, "I bet you didn't know they actually played bluegrass music at that church." I said, "Really?" So I heard all kinds of stories about it. I thought it was so cool and the way it evolved. And I think it was meant to be. I really do. And the only other thing I have about that little song is that the Witcher brothers recorded it in the late 90s, I think. Now, the Witcher brothers hit a little bit of popularity. They were on the charts, on the bluegrass charts, and they also were playing the background music for a television series that was set back in ancient Ireland. I don't remember the name of the series or anything, but it was the Witcher brothers, and they were playing the music for an Irish TV series. And and it was pretty cool that at that time is when they recorded my song. By the way, that's I have gotten more royalties off of that song than any other song I ever wrote. And quite honestly, I'm not getting rich. I think the biggest royalty check I ever got was $75. But when you consider they only pay you 3 or 4 cents per airplay, that's not too bad, because it had to be played pretty often to get $75, But anyway, I thought that was kind of funny. Yes, I did take up the challenge. I did listen to y'all, and I did write a song. Now, doggone it, I thought I had this ready, but I don't. I'm going to have to get into my tablet here to find the names of the people I wanted to mention. And, of course, there we go. So, on the song that you're about to hear, I did write it based on a theme that you all presented to me. Now, before I even mention the names, I want to say that more than one person mentioned some of these themes. But now the thing is, I picked the very first one I saw that struck a chord with me. And so that's the names I'm mentioning. If you don't get your name mentioned, I apologize. I don't want your feelings to be hurt. I'm just basing it on the first one I saw, and like if you drew a name out of a hat type thing. So the first name I saw with this theme was Rick Romanelli, and he said he would like for me to write a song about an 1800s farm family. Daniel Lampton had a little slightly different theme, and I incorporated it into the song as well. He says, "Another broken heart crying in the dark." And then Joseph Wallace, Treasures in the Ground was his theme. Well, I kind of included all those three things into the song. Now, I want to refresh, before I sing the song, I want to refresh a few things here so that you'll understand why I'm saying the things I'm saying in the song. I took poetic license, and I used two names, Sarah and John, and I don't know that those names are correct. It will really send chills up my neck if I find out that later those are the real names. That would be something. But if you recall, I found a wedding band in the spring. Now, this valley, my farm is basically one large, long, deep valley. It goes more than a mile straight back. My property line is exactly 1 mile from this end to the far end. It's exactly 1 mile. So, but the valley continues on even past my property line. So it's a huge valley. And of course it extends the other way too, on both ends of my property. In fact, it goes past both ends. So it is a huge valley. That's mentioned in the song a little bit. I tied it in through the Civil War, and the evidence for that is that I have Civil War bullets here. These are Fitch Van Vecht bullets, if I'm saying the name right. And these were made in 1864, 1865, another significant date to the song. Other evidence is an eagle button, and it's so smashed, it's hard to even tell which way it goes, but you probably won't be able to see the eagle in that. It probably won't focus, but there's an eagle there. So that's a General Service Civil War button. I found another, a mini ball. It's like a 69 caliber 3-ring mini ball, which was part of the Civil War. So those are my evidence for tying it to the Civil War. I also mention a baby in the song, and so I found evidence that there was a child, in that we found this little toy train wheel, and it's rusted to pieces. I mean, it's really tiny. So this was before electric trains. You can pretty much tell that. This was just a roll-around type train. Or if it was a train, it might have been a wagon for all I know. I mean, I don't know. And we found a clay marble. So that's the other evidence I have that there was a child there. So anyway, I tied it all together with the themes that were mentioned by these folks, and the stuff that I just showed you there is what I'm basing the song on. So I hope you like it. I'm in the key of C in case anybody cares and wants to play along. Dropping my pick. How come I feel nervous? It's like anytime I do a first time song. Okay. Sarah married John in 64. In that same year he marched off to war. In the valley he left her all alone. But that would change soon after he had gone. In the cold, cold water she washed the baby's things. It was there she lost her precious wedding ring. Feeling more alone, she longed for his return. The nights were long as her heart would yearn. 160 years come into view. Her precious wedding band was found anew, as if her soul was there for all to see. Sarah, John, and the baby. The war raged on as Sarah made her way. The baby grew more like John every day. She prayed that one day soon the war would end, and she'd see John running round the bend. Despite the odds, John made his way home. Though weak and sick, Sarah would hang on, till the baby's daddy held him at his breast, allowing Sarah to find eternal rest. 160 years come into view. Her precious wedding band was found anew, as if her soul was there for all to see. Sarah, John, and the baby. at 60 years come into view, her precious wedding band was found anew, as if her soul were there for all to see. Sarah John and the baby. There you go. Whether it's any good or not, I don't know. You'll have to be the judge. I felt really rusty writing that. I was so out of practice writing a song, and it was difficult. I have to be honest. It took a while to get that to work out. I had to work on it pretty hard. Usually I don't have to work that hard to get it to work out, but I worked on that one pretty hard. I hope you liked it. Anyway, let me scroll back up here and see where the questions start, or the comments and things. Zappa says it's a cloudy day here in Missouri. You're right, it is kind of that way. It's kind of cold too, dreary cold in this valley this morning. Let me see if I see any questions up here or comments or anything that I need to talk about. I can't pronounce this name. W. Groche, Groche. Jerry, thanks for the deer antler saddle I recently bought for my Eastman MD 815. Wow, this Mando was already loud, but dang, that saddle turns it up to an 11. That's good to hear. The stock options report says on a ladder brace 60s Harmony, the straight edge clears the bridge without string tension, but not with string tension. The culprits are the low E, A strings. Where should I place a cross brace? Well, I don't, that's assuming you need a cross brace. I don't know that that's how I would approach it. If it's bending, in other words, if it's pulling that much where it, well, actually, it doesn't make sense, really. Honestly, it doesn't quite make sense. Typically, with no tension, if it's barely clearing the bridge, then when you put tension on it, the neck pulls up, and now the straight edge is hitting below the bridge. So if that's the case, that's not going to be fixed, I don't think, by any kind of bracing that you're going to put in your guitar. I don't think. Unless the front neck bracing area is out of it or loose or broken or something like that. That might help if that all's fixed. But to me, what it sounds like, it's got all the smell that it's some kind of a neck issue and or neck block issue and or sides loose from the top back issue. I mean, it could be any of those things. I don't know that a brace is going to help you. It doesn't sound like it to me. But anyway, that's just me talking, and what do I know? Moving on here. Complimentary there. Let's see. I'm not sure if they were talking about the first song. I think they are, because I don't think this has gotten down to where the second song started. I don't know for sure. Slightly technical. See, I noticed on a few videos you had trouble getting glue into tight places. One thing I would do is use 7-gauge diabetic insulin needles. I can't get needles to work for me at all. I've used them a million times, and I'm not kidding when I say a million times. I've tried them and tried them and tried them and tried them and tried them, and everybody says, use needles, and I can't get them to work. They don't work. The glue's too thick, it just won't go through, it just gives me more trouble than it's worth, and it just ain't worth messing with, sorry, that's just me. But I've tried them a bunch of times, and I've got all size needles too, by the way. I've got large ones, small ones, and if you don't have a small one, it ain't gonna fit into most of the cracks anyway that you need them in, so it just doesn't work for me. Everybody else can do it in the whole world and it works for them. It just does not work for me. I've tried it and tried it and tried it. And I'm sick of trying it. The Happy Knot. Have you noticed the violin Pro Art strings come in 2 different packages? One is gold color and says Perlon core, and the other is red and says nylon. To me, the Perlon sounds much better. I have noticed that you can get it in 2 different versions, one with a wrapped E and one with a plain E. And I always get the wrapped E. Maybe there's a difference in the core on all of those. I don't know. Between those 2, I don't know. I've never noticed the core difference, but I definitely notice the wrapped E difference, and I want the wrapped E for a violin string. Anytime you have a plain E string on a violin, it's pretty harsh. It's pretty tinny. So get a wrapped E is your best recommendation I can make for you on a violin, on your strings. I see no questions at all. Your song was excellent. You still got it. You still got it. That was Milan Toombs. Thank you, Milan. I appreciate that very much. Okay, well, I don't see any more questions or comments, and I have a couple of questions here from yesterday, but only a couple. So maybe I just wore you guys out. Gary Boer says, what happens if you make your antler saddle thinner? Well, it's a good question, Gary, and actually on this mandolin, this is probably the thinnest one I've ever made. Now, this was the second mandolin I ever made. It's got the original antler saddle on it still, but it does have a slight underbow, I'll admit. So that's probably one of the things that happens, is that it's not strong enough, so you can't make them too thin. And the second thing is that the walls, for the posts get too thin if you make them thinner. And on some mandolins, like I think some of the Eastmans is specifically, or maybe it's the lowers, I can't remember, but some of them have larger posts, and so you have to drill the holes out even bigger, so you'd have a problem there for sure. So I make them to the mainstream medium-sized posts. A few of the mandolins, like the Collings, I think, has the real tiny posts, and that irritates a lot of mandolin players. They don't like that looseness on those posts. Now, I don't have any problem with it. I can set it on a loose post, and I do not have a problem, period. End of discussion. It just works for me. I've had small post saddles many times, or bridges many times, and never had a problem. But a lot of people just think you can't make that saddle with large holes work on a small post bridge. I don't have a problem with it, but if you can't get it to work, I understand. And you can return them if you buy one like that and it doesn't work for you. But as far as making them much thinner, you can't really go too much thinner. I kind of make them to the average of the world, and that's about as good as I can do, I think. But in terms of sound, I don't think it's going to change the sound all that much anyway. It might change it a little bit, but I'm not even sure a dog would hear the difference, honestly. Michael Berkmeyer, drill size for tuning keys. Someone already answered this in the comments. It said that it would depend on your tuning keys, and it certainly does. And the way I determine the drill size for tuning keys is I just go to the StuMax site and I look up the tuning keys I have, and it tells you all the specs there on the page for the drill size and all that stuff. So that's how I do it. But if I don't have that ability, if it's some off-the-wall tuning peg, then I just go to this right here and figure it out. And then I'll tell you one other thing that's really helpful. Watch this for a second, I'll get it.
Opal's got a little shop, coffee, tea, and soda pop, written on the faded window sign. Ruby and Pearl are her best.
I always hate to cut Renee off because she was such a great little singer there and a good bass player. Just always enjoyed having her in the band. And for those of you who don't know, Renee passed away with brain cancer, and she was Emery's, my daughter-in-law, she was Emery's mother. Renee and I were just outlaws. In other words, her daughter married my son, and her and I played music together, which is just kind of funny. But anyway, this is the piece I went to get. If you don't have one of these, you need one of these. I mean, like, I use this thing all the time. I'm always, finding the proper size hole to drill. Like, in other words, you can put your tuning tuning key, you can just poke it through these holes until you find the right size. And then you just pull that drill out and you drill it. So get one of these. They're cheap, simple, and they're just worth their weight in gold all the time I use it. I use it all the time for all kinds of things, not just for tuning keys, but for anything. Anytime you need to drill a precise hole, you just keep poking the thing you're trying to drill a hole for through those holes till you find the right one. And it works. It's just a no-brainer. It's a really good little tool. So that's how I determine that. Do we have any more questions? It looks like we got a few now. John C. Needles might work if you thin the glue. Yeah, I agree with that. And if you drill a pilot hole and all that. But, I don't want to go to all that trouble. Especially not thinning the glue. I'm just not into that too much. I mean, I will put water in the crack a little bit, and then the glue will find its way and suck its way down through there, and now this thing went out of focus, and it's probably going to do like it did the last time and just stay out of focus for a while. I don't get it. Jeff Puris says, how much fret wear is too much before needing a fret dressing? Well, you ask 10 different luthiers, and you're going to get 10 different answers on this, but I'm a proponent of filing them and filing them and filing them before you replace them. In other words, they can get fairly low. You can't get them right down to your fretboard, of course. But, if it becomes uncomfortable to play or something, well, then for sure. But, no, most people, they bring them to me, and you can almost know what they're going to say before they say it, and because I've heard it 1,000 trillion times. These frets have a lot of wear. They need to be replaced. I mean, that's the standard line. And I'll look at them and I go, well, I can file them and they don't really need to be replaced. And typically I can file them and they look just like brand new, and you can't even tell they've been filed most of the time, And you can usually do that several times. Now, there's always exceptions. It depends how much it was played, of course, and how deep the grooves are, etc., and so forth. But typically, you can file them a lot more often than you think you can. You can get 2 or 3 filings out of most frets. Now, again, it depends on the person. If you've just wore them down to the nub, well, you might get 1 filing out of them. But if you're the average person and and they look deep, and they're really not that deep, then you might get 2 or 3 filings out of them, or more. And what the thing that people don't get, and even a lot of luthiers don't get this, is that there's a mirror effect in that when you wallow a piece of metal out, it looks much deeper than it is. There's kind of a shiny mirror effect there, and it looks so much deeper. The way to tell is just put your leveling file on there, start leveling, and if it starts to come out pretty quick and you're able to get it filed out and feather it out to the other frets, no harm, no foul. Just go ahead and go with that and round it off and call it good. The main thing is they got to be level. As long as they're level, you're in good shape. Okay. RAS 1500, do you plan on making some sort of display case for the artifacts? Yes, I am going to do something, and I'm not sure yet what that will be. But yeah, I am. And even for the ancient artifacts that I found from the Native Americans, I want to keep them all here. Because once you take them out of context, they don't mean anything. Collectors collect them from all over the world, but they don't mean anything to the archaeology of the area once they're removed, And so having them here in context is the important thing to me. And anyway, I'm going to put my hand up here to see if this thing will refocus. Doggone. Maybe it did. I think it did. It's just, I didn't even tell you about the problems I had this morning. I kept, you got to think, well, it's got to be this guy. It's got to be him doing this. It's not, trust me. I just turned the computer on, and I never have really any problem with this computer until the morning of Shop Talk. And every single morning of Shop Talk, something new happens. And this morning, the screen was black, and it would not get off of black. And I powered off, restarted, powered off, restarted, powered off. You name it, I tried it, and nothing but black screen. That's all I got. Finally, I unplugged the monitor, plugged it back in, and it came up with a small screen about this big. I reset the display, and it works. So, gee whiz. Uh-oh, it looks like I'm dropping frames like crazy according to this program. It says drop frames detected 39% over the last 2 minutes. So hopefully we're not cutting out too bad. Sorry. I tell you, it's just not easy being me. A lot of people use that for my theme, or some of the other sayings too. Was another common theme for my for the song suggestions. A song suggestion that I might use down the road was from I think from Andrew in Scotland. He suggested sad guitar sitting all alone, that type of thing, and I might do that somewhere down the road. You just never know. I've thought about that one before, in fact. Let's see. Okay, the Happy Knot says, what's the better mandolin, Eastman's or Lohr's? Well, I've seen good ones in both, but to try to be a diplomat here and not make one or the other mad, I would say that I've seen more consistency in the Eastman's. But I've heard some really good Lohr's. But in terms of consistence, in other words, almost every Eastman I hear is pretty good or could be pretty good with a proper setup. So the Eastman's, I think, if you're taking a chance and buying it sight unseen, I'd probably, pretty much guarantee you'll be okay with the Eastman as long as it's mechanically sound, It's not broken or something. Gene Son is asking, took your advice on the solid mahogany washburn, gave it to grandson, and ordered a new D10. Very good, very good. That's a good idea, I think. Preston Johnson said he watched Scott's guitar video with his new guitar, and it was a beautiful guitar and really liked the song. Well, thank you there, Preston. So yeah, Scott was wanting to come down today or stop in today. His daughter lives past me down on the highway quite a ways, a couple hours past me actually. And anyway, he was going to stop in and this evening and record something for you all. But unfortunately, I'll be at a jam this evening, so I don't know if we'll get that done or not. Yeah, somebody else recommended this too, that I write a song about hide glue. And you know what? That would be a good theme. Trust me, it's not out of my mind. I could probably write a humdinger around hide glue, but I haven't tried that yet. The Outboard Tinkerer 62, do you take free mandolins with minor repair to fix and donate? Yeah, I have done that. Quite honestly, I'm not working with very many kids right now, other than this new young man, and he was pretty much dead set against trying to learn the mandolin. He wants his guitar, because that's what his grandpa played, was guitar, And him and his grandpa were like this, and his grandpa passed away, and even if I had a free mandolin here to give him, I'm not too sure he'd want it. I don't know. Like I told you, this boy is really, really, really strong-willed. It's really hard to explain how strong-willed this guy is. But I'm cracking that shell little bit by little bit. I'm pretty good with kids on working with instruments and stuff, and I think he'll come around, and I think eventually I'll get him on a mandolin too. But it's going to take a little while. But sure, if you want to donate one, I'll be able to, like this young man, I might be able to just give it to him or something. Blaine Cox, are you planning on making a new music album? Not right away, Blaine. I never thought I would lose the skill to run my recording system. But boy, I have. I'm not kidding you. Well, first of all, even when I was up on top of it and really understood it well, I always told the people that were recording, I said, I'm telling you right now, this is the most complicated machine ever invented by a human short of the space shuttle. I mean, it really has more modes and more, like you push 4 buttons at a time to get a certain mode. It's a complicated machine. But anyway, the point is, because of that, I probably won't be doing an album soon. Mostly because I just can't run that machine anymore, because I'm not doing it every day like I used to do it. Or even if I just did it once a month, I mean, at least I was up on it. I haven't done it in several years now, and I have lost most of the expertise on that. Oh, it's sad. It really is. Zappa, have you, let's see, Jerry, are you using the Starlink for the Shop Talks? Yes, I am using Starlink. We don't have the better service yet. The electric company has not run in the fiber optic yet, but I'm hoping that sometime this year, maybe that'll happen. Travis the Fixer, song suggestions, Daddy's old guitar hanging on the wall. Yeah, that's a good theme. It really is. And it may happen one day. You never know. What's involved in changing an acoustic guitar from a right hand to a left hand? Well, if you really want to do it right, you know, now I'm going to exclude the bracing herissue because, you know, it is what it is, and there's no reason to try to change all the braces. But if you're trying to change a right-handed guitar to a left-handed guitar, I would say the main thing would be your nut and your bridge. And your bridge is basically backwards for the intonation. In other words, if you switch the strings, say you change your nut and put a different nut on it, well, now you put your bass strings where your treble strings used to be, your saddle is now closer on your bass strings. It's going to make them incredibly sharp, and it's going to make your treble strings incredibly flat. That's why those are, because of the diameter of the string, that's why that saddle is sloped where the trebles are closer to the closer to the nut. Anyway, so that would be your main thing. You would need to change. Of course, you could think about your pick guard too, but the pick guard is kind of a moot point. It's not that big a deal one way or the other. But in terms of actually playing and making it sound right, the bridge would be your main obstacle. Not to say you couldn't just switch it and just let it rip. You could do that, but a person who's picky on the sound wouldn't like it much. So that would be the main thing. Your bridge you'd have to have a left-handed bridge made for it, or you'd have to purchase a left-handed bridge and then swap the bridges out, and then you'd have to make a left-handed nut. That would be your bare minimum, I would say. Hilton McLaurin says, morning from Lubbock, Texas. I enjoy watching your videos. My old fingers allow me to play slack key, having fun with that. What are your thoughts on a Koa guitar? Well, I think Koa is a nice wood. I think Koa is similar to mahogany. It might be a little between mahogany and rosewood in terms of density and sound and all that. I'm not big on a Koa top on an instrument. And again, I've said this many times, but the top in my book, my book only has spruce, cedar, and redwood for tops. Pretty much that's it. I'm sure there's at least one or two other woods out there that would work. But for my, what I know about wood right now and everything, I would say it's either got to be spruce, cedar, or redwood for a top. So I wouldn't want Koa for the top, but the Koa for the back and sides is fine. Koa's a good sounding wood. It's okay. Let's see. Phil says it sounds like you're using a Tascam 2488. Very similar. It's a Roland 2480, I think it is. It's a very complex little machine. Let me tell you, it's really not easy to use. It really isn't. I had it down. Even when I had it down, I'll be truthful. When I had it down and really felt like I knew it very well, I was using 10% of its capability. 10%. And maybe not that much. I might be giving myself too much credit. But I was definitely not using more than 10% of its ability. I'll say it that way. That's a cool machine, and if you really, really, really knew it, it'd be great. It really would. But the truth is, I knew less than 10% of it, but I felt like I was doing a really, really good job with it, and I got compliments, and some of the albums I recorded won Album of the Year in local organizations and things like that. Nothing real big, but I did record two black ladies came here and sang Negro spiritual songs. That's their term, not mine. And they were when PBS did a documentary on slavery. Those two black ladies came here and sang the Negro spirituals, the kind that the slaves sang out in the fields. They did them all a cappella, and I recorded all that, and that was played in the background on the PBS series on slavery. And that was recorded by me on that machine. And right now, I couldn't do that. The other world famous thing I did was in my recording studio, it was just a little recording studio here on my farm. But it was world famous. And that is that the huge Joplin tornadoes that hit years ago now, they sent several of the survivors up here, about 8 or 10 of them up here, and the is it PBR? No, NPR. NPR was on the phone with them in my studio, and I recorded the phone conversation and I recorded their live interview. Like they would ask them the question over the phone, and I would record the response, and I sent all that recording back to NPR, and that was all played on National Public Radio. So amazing the things I did for my tiny little studio. But I did record a lot of CDs here back then, and I really did feel like I was on top of it. I can't hardly use it now. And I don't have the desire to get back into it and learn it is my problem. If I did, I think it would come back to me fairly quickly, but whew, that is one tough machine. I'm not kidding you. If it's a Roland, it's also dang nice. Yeah, it was a nice machine. It really was. It was a giant console. It was a pretty big console. It wasn't like a real big professional recording studio. It wasn't like that. But it was a nice big console with, I think, 16 inputs. I mean, it was a pretty robust outfit. You could pretty much do anything with it you wanted to do with it. Well, some people could. Not so much me all the time. Anyway. Let's see here. Joseph Knoll. Jerry, what wood do you use to make the Kurt? You must be trying to say kerf. I think kerf is what he's saying there. I think. So Joseph, if that's what you're saying, I'll answer that. The wood I use for the kerf most of the time is mahogany. I have used spruce and other woods. I have used redwood, and it works just fine. The kerf isn't overly important to the instrument, but mahogany is kind of the world standard, and that's kind of what I typically use. But a lot of other woods will work for the kerf, if that's what you're asking there. Unsafe at Any Speed asks, what are your thoughts about adding a preamp and piezo pickup to an acoustic jumbo? Well, the truth is I'm not an expert on that, so I probably will beg off of that one, except that I would say that my preference and I do have a fairly big basis of comparison. but my preference for pickups on acoustics is something made by LR Baggs. Almost anything LR Baggs puts out for their acoustics is going to be top notch. I technically am a dealer for LR Baggs, but I don't deal because, quite honestly, they don't give me much of a discount, and it's not worth my time. And because you can go buy them on the internet for the cheaper than what I could sell them for, so it doesn't make any sense. But that doesn't take away from the fact that I still think LR Baggs is really top-notch pickups for acoustics. So I can't answer your specific question, but if you go with LR Baggs, you'll thank me, you'll bless me. Wanda Porterfield, I was stuck on you with the high clues, so I know your love won't last. Whoa, that was good, Wanda. That really was good. I like it. Dang it, now I can't use that because you used it. Oh, that's a good line. I like that. That's a real good line. Dang, I wish I'd have thought of that. That's a really good line. Yeah, I could write a song around that. I might do it. You just never know, Wanda. You might hear a song coming. Preston says he'd like to find a link to the two ladies singing those old songs. And, you know, Preston, the truth of it is, I probably got their names somewhere, but finding it would be kind of difficult. But if I run across that, I'll be sure to mention that on a future video. But right now, I don't recall what their names were. I'll tell you how that came about. See, that's kind of an odd thing in itself. There was a black gentleman in this area he was sent here by one of my other recording people, that came here quite often. And they said, well, if I was you, I'd take that to Rosa's String Works, and have it recorded there. And so this black fella, I can't think of his name either. You know me and names. I can't think of names. I know it. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't think of it. Anyway, he came here several times and was very happy with his recordings. And he did kind of like the blues style, the old New Orleans type bluesy, slide guitar type sound and stuff. I mean, he was very good. He wrote his own songs. I really enjoyed having him here. Well, then he recommended to those two black ladies. Now, they were all the way up in Champaign, Illinois. That's a long way from here. And they drove all the way down here to make those recordings. Whew, man, I'm glad it came through. Anyway, that's how that evolved. What's your thought on canary wood backensides? Well, I don't have a thought on that because I've heard of canary wood, I think. I think I've heard of that, but I don't know anything about it. Honestly, nothing. I've never seen a piece of it that I know I might have saw it and didn't know it, but I haven't seen any that I knew of. Christian just says, hello from Denmark. Thanks to you, I know you have 30 guitars I have bought cheap and made into well-cared-for instruments. Oh, I now have 30 guitars I have bought cheap and made into well-cared-for instruments. Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for he's saying that, I think he's saying in a comment there that I helped him with that, and so I'm glad that worked out for you there, Christian, and thanks for watching the videos. Preston says, yes, for LR Baggs, sounds so much better than under saddle pickups. I have both. Yeah, and LR Baggs makes an under saddle in combination with their internal mics also. You could do that too, but I prefer just the internal mics without the mostly not so much for what it does to the sound, mostly just because what it does to the saddle itself. It lifts the saddle up, which gives the saddle less bite in the slot, which makes it more likely to tip and crack your bridge. That's why I don't like the under saddle pickups more than any other reason. But it's not as good a sound either, generally speaking. So, That too, but mostly because of what it does. Terry Beeson is asking, get Caleb on your grandkids to learn that board. Those young folks will pick up on the gadgets really quick. Yeah, maybe. I'll tell you what, I'm really good. Well, I was. I'm not so, as you know, I'm getting older and things are sliding. I know that. But man, I was really on top of mechanical gadgets, electrical gadgets, and computers and smartphones and all that. And I pretty much understand them pretty well. So, I'd show that to a lot of people and they just shake their head, because it was pretty complicated. So I get where you're coming from, and that may be where I have to go next. But in the past, I could do that. C Drive 300 saying, Jerry, I know you like GHL silk and steel strings. Do you like their silk and bronze strings as well? The silk and bronze don't do for me what the silk and steel do, at least on a mandolin. I've said many times, if you want your mandolin to sound more woody, put the silk and steel strings on it. The silk and bronze are good strings, but they don't change the sound as much to my ear as the silk and steel. I'm not saying they're bad strings, just that they don't change the sound to the woodier sound as much. That's my take on it. Do you, Blaine Cox, do you have a preferred brand of chainsaw? Well, mostly one that really works well. Because I wear them out. I couldn't even tell you how many saws I've gone through. I'm on my second, I think, 372 XP, which is a Husqvarna. Before that, I had a John Sered, and John Sered and Husqvarna I like really well. They've got high RPMs on their saws, and that's what I really like. I have a steel right now also that I like really well. It's a MS251C, I think is what the number is. It's about a 50cc saw. So I call that my little saw. A lot of people would use that as their main saw, but it's kind of a little saw for me. The bigger saw, the 372 XP, has 70 some cc, I think 71 cc, something like that, and it's got a 25-inch bar and can handle, I think, up to a 36-inch bar. But 25-inch, if you use a shorter bar on a saw, it will instantly give it way more power. And I'm into the power and all that and the speed cutting more than I need a huge long blade. Anyway, so that's my take on it right now. But truly, if a saw works well, I'm all for it. I sharpen my own chains on my Oregon sharpener. Lots of people say I'm a wimp because I don't sharpen them with a file and all that. I can sharpen them with a file. But when I take 7 chains with me to go cut wood, that's a lot of file sharpening, and I can do it on my sharpener in about a minute per chain or something like that. Maybe a little more than that, maybe 2 or 3 minutes per chain. But you ain't got to sharpen them by hand that fast, I can tell you. And the sharpening them on the machine makes them all exactly the same. You think you can make them the same by hand, not too likely. They get exactly the same with my machine. And I'm very good with that machine in that I barely cut anything off of it. I just cut off just enough to make it sharp again. So I can do a really good job with the machine. I discovered that my machine, my Oregon sharpener, had a flaw from the factory. Now, it took me 15 years to discover this because I couldn't figure out why I was having so much trouble with that machine. But sure enough, it's off by 5 degrees one way or the other. On one side, you got to swing it to 30 degrees. On the other side, you swing it to 25. And if you do that, it cuts perfect. Perfect. I mean, like both sides come out exactly to the 1,000th of an inch the same. The angles are perfect. Everything's perfect. It's just a factory default. A factory fault is what it was. But it took me a long time to discover that, and I discovered it by accident. And but boy, I'm glad I made that accident. Moving on here, let's see if I find any other comments or questions. Let's see. Jerry, I know you like. Oh no, that one we already did that one. Blaine Cox, do you? No, got that one too. I thought I saw it scrolling up, so okay. Raz 1500 Project Farm just did a test on gas-powered chainsaws, steel, and had the higher RPM. Yeah, but did you also notice that his steel was also several cc's more than the Husqvarna? But the Husqvarna is much higher RPM. When you compare apples and apples, at least it's been my comparison every time. And I have used quite a few steels, and I have used quite a few Husqvarnas, and so far, every single one of them that was an apples to apples comparison, the Husqvarna had the higher RPM. And I'm into that because when you get that much power behind a high RPM, it cuts. I mean, it flat cuts. I'm not saying the steels don't cut, they cut fine. There's nothing wrong with a steel saw. So it's not even that I have a huge preference. The Husqvarna is just a good saw too, though. It's just as good as the steel in my opinion, and the steel's just as good as the Husqvarna if you really want to get right down to it. I don't have a problem with either one of them. And I did see the Project Farms comparison. I definitely saw it, but the CCs were not the same at all. And and they make so many different versions of those saws in the range he was looking at. They make so many different versions of it. You're not comparing apples and apples there. Not at all. Not even close. Terry Beeson, have you ever seen Violet Hensley making her fiddles? Yes, I have. I met her one time, but only briefly, and she wouldn't remember meeting me. It was a long time ago. I don't even know if she's still alive, but if she is, I wish her well. It was interesting to see how she did that. Doug Centeniello. I can never say his name properly, I don't think. He's telling Bob that he needs to put the question marks in front of his question. So Bob, which one was Bob? Is that the one right above? Bob Flowers. Good morning from Nashville. The top of my Martin 00015M has an area about 3 inches, which is lifting. What glue should I use? The top of my Martin has an area about 3 inches. Okay, well, first of all, try to clean it as good as you can. Knock out any old glue that's in there as best you can. And the way I typically do that, if it's a slot, if it's a tight slot, I take my X-Acto blade. See, I got my new blue blade in there. And I take my X-Acto blade and I slide it into the slot, and I go backwards, not cutting, not cutting with the cutting edge. I go with the back edge because it's squared off, but the edges are really sharp, and you can scrape along and scrape the glue out, and you can scrape across the top, and you can scrape along the sides and scrape the glue out. Get as much of that out of there as you can, and then go with Titebond Original, and you'll be just fine. And assuming you clamp it well. You can't put too many clamps on stuff like that. Now, you got to be a little careful with your pressure on your sides, because you could crush it. I mean, you don't want to go nuts on it, but you can't put too many clamps in terms of keeping good contact on the crack. In other words, you don't just put one crack in the middle of a 3-inch gap and think you did a good job. You need to put a clamp there. You need to put a clamp there about another 3/4 of an inch away, and another 3/4 of an inch away, and you do that all along that crack, or maybe even a 1/2 inch away. I mean, it's better. The closer they are, the better you're going to be with your repair. So don't spare the clamps. Not that you have to crank them down real hard, but they got to be firm, just nice and firm. Blaine Cox is, do you journal, possibly write book about your life? No, I don't. Yeah, you kind of wish I would have. That would be kind of neat, but I'm not the kind of guy that could keep up with that. I would slack off and wouldn't get it done. That's just me. But that would be cool had that happen. Well, let's see. We're at 9 o'clock. I'm going to think that's just going to be about it for today. I hope you liked my two songs, The Vine Covered Church and The Wedding Band. That's what I've titled the new song I wrote. I called it The Wedding Band, just based on the fact that I found her wedding band. By the way, and you probably cannot see this, but right there you can see a little gold flake. I think you can see it. And there's more gold flakes around. As I cleaned this with some vinegar, you could see more and more gold. For the longest time, try it again. Didn't work this time. For the longest time, you could not see any gold on that ring at all. None. Zero. It would just look gray or brown or whatever color that is. I can't tell what color it is. Rusty color. And anyway, then once I cleaned it, you could see a little bit of gold. And now that I cleaned it with the vinegar, you can see even more. I'm going to look under a high-powered microscope and see if I think cleaning it would do more good, because I would love to bring more gold out on this. I think that would just be awesome. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Oh, wow. Man, this thing just started scrolling up like crazy, and I see questions like crazy. I hate to leave them. Let me look and see. Wow. Okay. Well, maybe not that many. There looks like there's 2 or 3 real quick. Terry Beeson, do you strop your X-Acto blades? Can you show how in terms of resharpening them and that type of thing? I do resharpen them occasionally, if that's what you're asking. And I just sharpen them with my little typical Arkansas sharpening stone and then leather. That's the way I do it. Is the X-Acto as thin as a razor blade? No, it's thicker than that. They're a little thicker than that. I don't know the razor blades. You can get razor blades in a lot of different thicknesses. I typically use the thicker razor blades. I think mine are 9 to 11 thousandths, somewhere in there, and you can get them thinner than that. But I like the thicker razor blades. This is thicker than that. This is like 20 thousandths thick. So, like, my thick razor blades are about 11 thousandths. So this is about twice as thick as a razor blade. Hilton McLaughlin, it's doing it again. It ain't gonna change. I hate that. So changing the string gauge will alter the intonation if you don't adjust the saddle. You know, probably a little bit. It will, Hilton, but you know, very minimal on that, unless you change it significantly. Like when you flop it over, you've changed it significantly. You know, going up or down like a light to a medium, or from a medium to a heavy, or, you know, that little bit of change is not going to make that much difference. Very few people could hear that difference. But when you go from the big string down to the tiny string, or vice versa, you know, which you would do when you flop it from right to left, that would make a big difference. Especially the fact that the saddle's already angled to favor the way it is normally, or, you know, for the right hand, if you will. When I say normally, I don't really mean normally. But anyway, Danny Fisher. Jerry, one quick question. What are the string heights for a 5-string banjo? The truth is on that one, Danny, I don't know. I would typically set it pretty similar to a guitar. I really would. I don't have any particular thing I do different for a banjo. So I typically set it up pretty similar to a guitar. You can get away with a little bit higher on a banjo because the string pressure is not very much. So if that helps you. Edward Kashuba, Jerry, have you ever used rubber bands solid long for use on guitar repair? I've seen being used in Asia. Yeah, I I've used them on the channel several times, rubber bands. And if you're just talking about an actual rubber band, the band itself where you stretch it across or that type of thing, yeah, I've done that too, but I haven't done that on camera, I don't think. But I do have a real long elastic rubber band that one of my viewers sent me, and I've used that. I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of the rubber band itself for that application. But I do like the inner tube, the rubber inner tube. Man, that thing has just got the right amount of elasticity, and it sticks real good when you wrap it, and it'll follow. You can do it on curves and on sloped sides and stuff, and it doesn't slide too easy. The inner tube, for me, is where it's at. Unfortunately, I only came up with that in the last 5 or 6 years. Man, I wished I'd have used that my whole career, because the inner tube is where it's at. So if you take an inner tube and you cut a long circular strip, three quarters of an inch wide, and you just keep going around and around and around and around and around till you run out of inner tube, the longer the better. You trust me, you'll find uses for all of it if you're building an instrument. All right, one last question, and then we're going to call it good. Edward Kashuba. No, that's the same one. Okay, well, that's going to be it, guys. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed my songs. We'll see you probably at least Monday. I do think Emery has a video for release for this evening, and I'll be sure to get that out to you. We'll see you next time.